Let's cultivate the visualization field with Manjushri in front of us, in the space above us, radiant, glowing with its magnificent qualities, both of body and mind. Remembering the significance of the gestures, implements that he holds, and particularly thinking of him as the personification of the wisdom of all Buddhas. Of course, wisdom of all Buddhas are completely integrated with all other positive qualities at their consummate realization level. Also bring to mind the whole lineage of masters who passed on the Buddhist teachings in general, and in particular the lineage. Of course, beginning from Buddha, but coming through Manjushri, passing down the principal teachings, the wisdom. Lineage masters from then to the present. Thinking of them, let a sense of genuine appreciation, gratitude, and hope fill our body, mind, every single cell of it, completely saturated with awe, appreciation, gratitude, and of course hope for transformation. Think of ourselves being surrounded by fellow sentient beings, all in human forms, yet undergoing their own respective general and specific samsaric predicaments. Particularly bring your attention to those presently in the lower realms. How excruciating pain, suffering, almost unceasingly they are undergoing. And that's the gross level of suffering. There's no question about other levels of deeper suffering that we all presently share with everyone. In samsara, that is caught in this bondage of birth and death, and all the sufferings in between, brought about by afflictions and actions induced by them. Thinking of them generate a sense of affinity, of our being in the same boat, though temporarily in different positions, yet fully, equally susceptible to exchange roles, how unless and until we make efforts really seeing the samsaric condition for what it is and learn ways to get out of it, there is hardly any prospect of any betterment of the situation over the time. Also think of our dependence on each other despite our confusion, ignorance, limitations, failings. And also think of how, despite all this, either directly or indirectly, we have been extending our helping hand to each other, irrespective of whether we are aware of it or not. When we closely not a single moment passes by when we are not dependent on others. For whatever we aspire to achieve, worldly, super mundane aspirations, there is no other way but to depend on fellow sentient beings. Thinking along these lines, try to generate a sense of affinity growing into empathy, into compassion, into bodhicitta, keeping in view of one's current advantageous position. Now it would be high time to make the most of it. And the best way, the most surest way, both for the interest of oneself and others, is achieving full awakening, beginning with this aspiration of bodhicitta. With these in place, with our admiration, reverence, gratitude towards the merit fields, as well as our love, compassion, caring, bodhicitta, on behalf of all sentient beings, let's say this homage to Manjushri together. Let's hold the aspiration of bodhicitta in our mind. Aspiring to attain the state of full awakening, like Shakyamuni Buddha has done. That too for the sake of all sentient beings who desperately need guidance, direction, support in all ways possible. To get out of samsara. By way of strengthening our motivation for this session, Nagarjuna says in his precious garland, the entirety of the Buddha's teaching comes down to two purposes. One is for sentient beings to achieve higher rebirth. And then the second is to achieve definite goodness, which includes liberation for oneself, or for the sake of others, as well as full awakening for the sake of others. And he also spells out summarized means to achieve them. In the case of higher rebirth, he mentions tepa, which could be translated as faith, aspiration, as per someone's suggestion, conviction as well. But even if we are to stick to this word faith, it is very different than it may be commonly understood. In the Buddhist scriptures, we speak of three divisions or three types of faith. The first one is inspired faith, or faith with an elated sense of awe, inspiration, seeing others' qualities for the benefit of it. The second one is faith rooted in conviction that something is possible, that something is viable. And then the third is the faith which takes the form of not only appreciating and aspiring something, but driven by a longing to achieve it, to have it, to possess it. So in all of these respects, faith being spelled out here is not just mere naive allowance of something, but rather something that is supported by understanding, and that too progressively leading to a strong longing to achieve that quality within oneself. Now, with regard to definite goodness, be that both liberation, either liberation or liberation and full awakening, Nagarjuna, in his summary of the means to achieve it, mentions Shira, wisdom. And then he further goes on saying that between the two means of achieving them, wisdom is something that one's priority should go to. Yet at the same time, in the ways of cultivating it, in the ways of cultivating these two summarized means, first comes this aspiration, inspiration, and longing, more particularly in the sense of trust or confidence, conviction in the laws of karma, in the workings of causality in general, and in particular that of karma with a volition, agency being a very crucial part of it, leading to the resultant states of suffering, joy, pain, happiness, whatever. So, keeping these in perspective, give rise to a strong sense of appreciation, value, role, and place of wisdom. In our Buddhist journey towards full awakening ultimately, but before that to liberation, and before that by being able to obtain precious human rebirths, or precious rebirths successively. And towards that end, we are going to spend the next over an hour time making the most of this opportunity, furthering our pursuit to full awakening, preceded by achieving liberation for the sake of all sentient beings, preceded by succeeding in achieving successive, uninterrupted series of precious human rebirth, so that we could achieve full awakening for the sake of all sentient beings. Yeah, first of all, I want to thank all of you who have given feedback to how to proceed on this. And as you can imagine, as diverse as we are, the feedbacks are also quite diverse. And but at the same time, it was very helpful. In total, it was comprehensive feedback for me to remember what to be aware of and where to be particularly careful about, and also things, I mean, in short, to proceed sharing this with utmost mindfulness over the course, all along. By the way, I wanted to share something. Yes, in the Kadamba masters, even before the new tradition of Tsongkhapa came about, there were already three groups or three lineages, where you group masters in three groups. One is called Kadam Mengapa. Mengapa is more like a Piti instruction lineage. And Kadam Dangapa is not quite extensive, but not quite that pithy, but kind of looking for a mediocre volume of teachings. And then comes Kadam Shungbapa. Shung here means treatises. Those who take time in studying the heavy-duty, extensive treatises and build stand from there. So then there was nothing wrong in any of those ways of approaching it, except it has to resonate to one's own individual type or individual personality. And that's something very important for each one of us to recognize. It may evolve over time, but at the same time, at any given time, what type of group we belong to, we should be aware of that and thus be able to relate to that and deliver to that. At the same time, be open to the fact that there are others of different types also, and that I could also switch from one type to the other over time. So that's very important to keep open mind too. Yes, I recently came across a teaching where it's suggests, even in sutra also, one may be, irrespective of what path one may be, or even not making a case, making a point of how different paths they may be taking. even without making any comment on that, saying in the sutra, the pace at which practitioners move on is very different. And the sutra gives, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, five groups of practitioners in the sutra itself. In Tantra, it will be a little different, but still the difference in the pace will be there, not that dramatically different. Nonetheless, in Sutra, that kind of a difference is even more dramatic in that their pace has been likened to different vehicles that they are choosing to take to go into. The first one is, of course, it is understandable. We're talking of a long time ago. So when there were no iron birds and so it was speaking of someone taking a cattle-driven vehicle to elephant-driven vehicle to the movement equal to that of the sun and moon, and then someone traveling at the moon at the speed of what our hearts can do through their miraculous powers, and what someone could do with the miraculous powers of the Buddhas. Oh, I think it's Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. So, yeah, the variety in terms of so many ways is always there, and that's something to be appreciated, recognized, accepted, and at the same time, more importantly, where one falls is something to be cognizant about and try to then deliver to it. That's why one would be best benefited by it, but at the same time, be open to the fact that there could be others who are very different. And that also, importantly, I could evolve and switch into another group. That's important. I could be in there, I could be in there, I could be in there. Yeah. That's important. Okay, so then we'll resume from where we left. So this time I decided not to. Oh yeah, actually we already have several stanzas left. But even if we were to have run out of them, I was not planning to give you a new installment of spacing changes because I thought it was a little too much within a short period. And as I go on, so you will be using the original full translation, looking at that, and I'll be also looking at it in my web file form, where I would be making my own suggestive changes and letting you know, of course, with not much details. And then at the end of this sharing on this 9th chapter, which will be, I don't know how long from now, I'll be happy to then share my track changed copy, which will be then easy to make a clean copy and a track changed copy of both of them for people to then study deeper. Okay, so last time I took time in making this point that in the scriptures you will come across different ways of grouping these philosophical schools or philosophical stances. And it's important to remember them. I was saying that of the 4 philosophical schools, the bottom 2, namely the Vaibhashika and Sautantrikas, are called Chidun Temparamava, usually translated as realists. I think that's what the translation here also uses it sometimes. Yeah, it does. So by realist, they mean the Sautantrika and the Vaibhashika. And our definition for that will be someone who someone who advocates not only that there is an external thing outside of the mind, outside of the mind in the sense that things are not mere projection of the mind to the extent of being simultaneous with their corresponding objects. That's what the position of the Chittamatras are, right? They say they think of the world in a very idealistic way, to the extent of saying that everything that we see is simultaneous to the seer mind, and that the seer mind, seeing mind, and the seen object, they both come from one substantial cause. When that substantial cause is activated or it ripens, that's when it gives rise to both the object and the subject in an appearance of being different, but they are all connected. So that's how there is no external world out there. So the realist, our definition for the realist will be those who advocate that there is, that things are not like what the Chittamatans say, but things are not only not just mere projection of the mind, they are out there, and out there in a very true sense. So those who advocate truly existent external phenomena are called realists in our definition. So that's important to remember. So that excludes all the rest of the four philosophical schools. This realist school group, it includes just the Vaibhashika and Sautantrika. So it excludes Chittamatra, and it excludes Madhyamika, both Sautantrika Madhyamika and Prasangika Madhyamika. Because either they say there is no external object, or they will say, even if they were to be, they do not exist truly. That is important to remember. Okay, so cut short, realism, our definition is, the realists are those who advocate truly existent external phenomena. And then we spoke of another way of grouping these philosophical schools, where the first three, Vaibhasika, Sautantrika, and Chittamatra, they come together to be referred by one class. They come to be called by one name, and which is Nguemawa. Oh, did I? Yeah, I think I misspoke earlier. Yeah, realists include Chittamatra also. Sorry, I take that back. So let's first deal with the first two, the Vaibhashika and the Swatantrikas. They are called Dhammani. Yeah, they are called Dhammani. So the definition will be same, those who advocate truly existent external phenomena, but the name we are going to give them, I think we would have to come up with something. What do they call here? Yeah, but in the translation, does Geshe use any term? Okay, anyway, we'll for now call them either a Buddhist reductionist, or we will call them externalists. Right? And we reserve the term realist for this bigger group, which includes also the Chittamatra. They are called Ngwemawa, irrespective of what they think of things to be either mental projection or not. Those who advocate that things are truly existent, those will be the realists. Things are truly existent. Things are really true. Let's call them. Things are really true. They are called realists. And that excludes the Madhyamikas, both Sautantrikas and the Prasangika Madhyamikas. That's okay. So for now, we'll make do with these labels and move from there. So one more to review. The first two schools, Vaibhashika and Sautantrikas, they are together called either Buddhist reductionists or Buddhist externalists. That's externalist is closer to the Tibetan term, but we have to look if Krishna is in the translation using any other terms. And then realist, we are reserving it to include Chittamatra in the group. All three of them together are called realists in that they advocate that things are truly real. Or, things are truly real. That means existing truly. So from here, it will be very clear that the Madhyamikas, irrespective of whether they are Swatantrikas or Prasangika Madhyamikas, when it comes to things being truly existent, none of them upholds it. They may say they may differ in whether things are inherently existent or existing in and of themselves, existing intrinsically. They may differ. One may say yes, other may say no within the Madhyamika. But when it comes to true existence or absolute existence or ultimate existence, then there's no difference. Both of the subdivisions within Madhyamika, they deny it. So I think that's clear, right? So with that in mind, let's move to stanza 4 and 5, the last two lines of stanza 4 and the remaining of the stanza 5. So in the original translation, it says refuting objections from the proponents of inherent existence. So if you say proponents of inherent existence, then that would even include Swatantrika Madhyamika also. So that's not the case here. So here it is rather the realists in general, which means not specific to Chittamatra, neither specific to the non-Chittamatra realists, but realists in general, which applies to realists in general. So that means critiquing the position of the realists in general. So the main issue here, of course, the main aim is to really nail down ignorance, really nail down the main culprit of our predicament in the form of ignorance. That too, not just not just not just a naive recognition of ignorance, but rather really kind of pinpoint it by sorting it through all other propositions, if you will, and within that kind of really pinpoint it the ignorance, the ultimate ignorance. That's the main goal. Because unless and until we can nail that down and recognize it and see its presence within us, not just the presence within us, and see the havoc, the destruction it brings, of how it is the sole breeding ground for all the afflictions, subtle and gross, leading to their resultant negative actions of the body, speech, and mind, and then in turn leading to the sufferings, both in terms of gross, superficial sufferings, but more importantly, in terms of more in-depth, what do you call, underlying, underpinning sufferings in the form of our bondage to afflictions, to the affliction, even birth and death, and all other conditions associated with it. So that's the main project here. But as a way of doing it, one has to face the alternative propositions in regard to what is ignorance, or if at all such kind of ignorance exists or not. So those have to be tackled, and that's what is being done here by using the model of the philosophical proponents, irrespective of whether we speak in terms of philosophical proponents in this very structured, layered scheme or not. One has to eventually be able to locate it within oneself, and within that also, in doing that, also be able to really sort through it and end up in peeling it off, eventually coming to really the actual ignorance, where we understand its scope, measure, and the destruction that it brings, its mechanism, all of them, we get a clear hand on it. So for that purpose, the philosophical schools are not just limited to the Buddhists, but even going beyond that into the non-Buddhist propositions of how things exist or not. That has something to do with how we eventually recognize the ignorance. Those are all taken into account, and they are all critiqued here. So in that respect, training ourselves to think along the lines of the true truths is very crucial. And there too, again, we need to move in progression, and thus having some idea of what the position of at least within the Buddhist tradition, the tenet systems are with regard to the true truths is very helpful and crucial. As I mentioned last time also, in Chandrakirti's Madhyamika Avatarana, entry to the middle way, there also he takes time before delving into the actual problem of the ignorance in identifying it, both in the form of grasping at inherent existence of the self or that of the phenomena. He says, before doing that, we have to step back and look at the true truths in a more deeper way. And likewise, that's what's being briefly touched on earlier. But it would be good at your study times to look through tenet system, tenet book, and just look at each tenet's take on true truths and kind of compare them and see in what ways they are similar, in what ways they are different, and how and also try to see progressive refinement through them by putting them in their levels. And in a way, one could do that with just about any topic that the tenets systems kind of take up and care to differ from one another. You begin to see the progression in there. So if we study the tenet systems carefully, one would begin to actually see how that is a kind of a very thought through strategy in really not only training oneself but also leading others in training to think clearly, uh, uh, decisively, and think think clearly, decisively, and backed up by reasonings and logic, and that too in sync with our own experience. So that's it. We come to the earlier in the third stanza there was this mention of the two types of beings, yogis and common people. Either yogis and ordinary people, or yogis and common people. Here, common is not the ordinary common people, but rather less than the yogis that we have identified here, who have gotten clear understanding of the emptiness. Not only that, have even reached a meditative state of equipoise on that, and all the rest of them, in whatever ways they may be sophisticated, but those do not count so long as their take on the two truths falls short of Prasangika Madhyamikas. They are all included in the so-called common people or ordinary people here. That's one way of understanding it. But as I said last time, this identification of yogis and common people could be seen in that kind of a set group form, or it could be seen as something shifting with particular context. Whoever has the upper hand in understanding would be yogis in comparison with the other one, and they may shift roles within different contexts. So anyway, there the reference to yogis and common people has to do with those who are thinking along the two truths, which naturally means thinking little beyond the immediate needs, and they may differ in their range of how far off they want to think, but nonetheless, someone who are not just engrossed with the immediate needs, very similar to the animals, with very, very limited vision into the future. Not like that. So those who think little beyond that and think of larger, bigger questions and bigger issues, right? For them, it would be natural to think of the world system in these categories of one's relatively superficial, the other deeper, one relatively stable, the other not so much, etc., etc. They would have ways of developing them, ways of thinking through those lenses, and eventually, with the aim or the hope of them kind of having a direct bearing on one's own prospects of joy and happiness, and the possibility of mitigating suffering. So that's what the reference was to them in conjunction with our topic on the two truths. So a brief introduction, brief kind of inkling has been already dropped there in terms of which direction we are going. But in that respect, the author Shantideva wants to kind of proceed along this in a very systematic and step-by-step way. So in that respect, he first addresses this initial issue of where the difference lies, why the difference lies, what does that difference look like, by by uh, by critiquing the positions of the realists in general. So the realists who are proponents of true existence, right? So there, as one would naturally see in one's own individual case also, when we, particularly I remember very clearly in my days of studying Madhyamika, which we do in the monasteries for 3 years. And I used to think, what is the problem here? There doesn't seem to be any problem here. Things must exist the way they do. They cannot, otherwise they cannot. There's no other way for them to exist. And they are very distinct, very characteristics, uniquely characteristics, different, but not. They must have something to account for them. And that should not be a problem. Other than that, there's no such thing as things being truly existent, inherently existent. So this whole dialogue back and forth in saying this and that doesn't seem to have any real bearing in the real world. It's just a philosophical play. But then part of my mind was saying, no, this cannot be the way Nagarjuna and others really mean serious things. And there must be something. So I kept pushing. I mean, eventually, slowly, gradually, I did begin to see some difference, particularly when you are presented the different positions and how they critique each other. In the midst of that critiquing, then the subtle differences become apparent. So that's why brace for such occasions of what in the world is going on here to eventual, okay, maybe that, but what? You have something today and the next day, what was it? There wasn't anything. So that would be happening there. So that's how we will begin to see this dialogue among the so-called philosophical schools and the proponents of them actually could be taking place within ourselves, because we have a very, very strong base of the realists. No doubt about it. We have a very, very strong base of the realists saying, yes, things have got to be, things are functional in the way that others are not. And thus, they must have individual kind of a stable base for their difference. And what else would it be if they didn't have true difference, true line of difference among them? So unless we have very strong training basis from life before, we would be really beginning with such a very strong base of realists to begin with, and that's what we have to address, look at, and keep checking back. So in these 2 lines from stanza 4 that we briefly touched last time, by means of examples accepted by both and by means of examples accepted by both emptiness is established. Unanalyzed, the practitioners engage in trainings for the sake of the results. Here, the realists are saying there's no problem with how things exist. It must be the way we understand it, and thus what you Prasangika Madhyamikas are bringing forth in terms of things lacking inherent existence, things lacking any true existence, is a complete baloney. Right? Is a complete blown up thing, no bearing whatsoever in reality. So it says that the so-called emptiness is totally in existence. The so-called lack of inherent existence on things is totally unacceptable, totally not true. And saying that even if it were to be true, right? Even if it were to be true, there would be no way you could establish it. There would be no way you could rationally establish it. So those are the accusations presented by the realists beforehand, and to which the Prasangika Madhyamikas are addressing by these lines, by means of examples accepted by both, both here, both realists and non-realists, emptiness is established. It's saying that emptiness, or the lack of inherent existence that we are bringing on the table, is not only something that's real, that is existing, but it can also be established. In a way, both of these accusations are being addressed by this first line, by means of examples accepted by both the realist and the non-realists. Emptiness is established, or emptiness can be established. So when you say emptiness is established or can be established, it's already taken into account that yes, it is not a baloney, it is a real thing, and that it can also be proven. So both of these accusations are being addressed by this single line. And it does so by referring to the examples, the common examples that we can work from. Common examples are examples of the common examples of the disparity between appearance and existence that both these groups of tenet holders agree to, such as magicians, creation, or the reflection in the mirror, the reflection of moon in the water, etc., etc. So several of these examples that not just Buddhists, but even non-Buddhists, so long as they are philosophers, thinkers, whatnot, just about everyone all over the world can come up with these examples and make use of them. They may be using them in different ways, but nonetheless, all of them agree to the fact that there is a disparity between how things appear and how things exist, at least on superficial level, on more grosser levels. And for that, they use these examples from everyday life. Like those living in the desert, they would use this example of the mirage that is almost like a daily happening, daily occurrence that they encounter every day. Likewise, depending on where one happens to be living, there will be so many examples from everyday life of how there is a disparity, a disconnection between how things appear and how things exist. So between us, the realist and the non-realist, we have such examples common to both of us. Both of us accept these examples to be true, and these examples to be reflective of the fact that there's a double standard between how things appear, how things exist, and on that basis, we can progress on this journey of establishing this standard that we are taking, the Prasangika Madhyamikas, taking the things lack thoroughly, the things thoroughly lack inherent existence, true existence. So when it is referring to the examples of this incongruency between how they appear, how they do not exist, that itself is a first shock to their claim, if they were to think really carefully, to their claim that things have true existence, things truly exist. If things really truly exist, then if one were to kind of really think through it, that would mean that things do not. Things exist on their own. They are self-supportive, self-sufficient, and thus are not dictated by the causes and conditions external to them. But at the same time, saying that they represent this incongruency between how things appear and how things exist, then that itself is a contradiction in them. And that proves that, yes, something like emptiness, which ultimately is the very basis for this fact of how things appear one way and exist another way, how things are thoroughly dependent and contingent on others, with not the slightest tinge of any intrinsicality about them. It's the first shock against the realist, but they may not see it that way. For them, the very fact that things are dependent and are functional in the way they are, the very fact that things are dependent and thus are capable of functioning, operating in their unique way, itself is a reasoning for things having true existence. And they are really kind of they're really sunk in it, whereas that is a contradiction in their stand right then and they are not that they're able to see it. And then saying that these examples are there, the fact that these examples themselves are there, this means that the examples themselves are not truly existent. And then by making comparison, drawing comparison from these examples to other phenomena, that's clear indication that you are pointing towards what we are saying, things lack inherent existence. And then saying that by use of these examples, we can work our way through to establishing the things lack true existence. And then the realists. Here we could think of ourselves as realists if we are more comfortable with their stand of things being what they are, almost to the point of pointable, right? Things being pointable there, then it would be good to think ourselves as siding with the realists, and then defending our position. So the next way the realists defend their position is how come that there is this world of conventions outside, right? How come that there is this world of conventions outside that things are very distinct from each other, not just in the shape, form, appearance, but in what they can deliver in terms of functions. And those functions they deliver in such a way that only they are capable of, others are not. Even if others may share in their capability, there's this uniqueness to each one of them. And so it points to the reality of all of these. Whereas we are saying everything irrespective lacks inherent existence. And to us realists, when you say things do not exist inherently or truly, that's equal to saying that things do not exist at all. Because if things exist, they must exist in a true sense, because they are existing in a way that is kind of really supportive of this position, because they have this individual functionalities, individual capacities, and they kind of stand their ground and they play their role in the mixture of things, and without them it would impact the result, etc. So all of these seem to support that things must have a true existence. So the Prasangika Madhyamikas are saying, well, I too accept that there are conventionalities, they are different, they are functional, there are diversity, all of this. But that is only true in the face of an unanalyzed, when we do not analyze their ultimate nature, then we can affirm to their diversity, affirm to their diverse functionality, but not. And when we zoom in and analyze their actual nature, none of them will be that palpable and findable. So the Prasangika Madhyamikas are right away making inroad in shaking the ground of the realist, saying that only when unanalyzed, when we leave things unanalyzed, then yes, things are there and functioning the way they are, with all these differences and making difference that they do. But the moment which seem to then affirm that they have their own individual identity, almost to the point of being palpable and pointable and kind of really mikpeteso, kind of where we can really land on something to account for what they are, to account for these individual things. But in reality, the moment we begin to analyze them beyond the mere conventionality of the temporary, in a way, temporary formations of them, due merely and thoroughly to the different causes and conditions. The moment we begin to analyze them, then none of them will hold the ground, none of them will be able to withstand their analysis, and will give in to the analysis to the point that none of them can be findable, palpable, and pointable. So it's only when we do not analyze that things are capable of producing their results. And here, more particularly, results in line with what the practitioners do. Say, it's basically the training of the realists are saying that if things were to be totally lack of inherent existence, then how do you make the case for such practices as generosity and others resulting in full awakening? How does such a working of causality happen? Because in what you are saying, it almost seems like saying there's no cause. If there's no cause, then how could there be a result thereof? It's when you say that things do not exist inherently, including the act of generosity, the act of generosity and the aspects present in there, it's almost equal to saying that there's no act of generosity at all if they are lacking inherent existence. And if that is the case, then how does that lead to a state of full awakening? Because in the first place, the cause is not there. So the Prasangika Madhyamikas is saying that when we speak of cause and effect, of doing this leading to this, of going there and being able to do this and whatnot, we are doing that not from the perspective of analyzing things and getting to analyzing things and defining them within that perspective of analysis and making this distinction. Because if we were to do so, there wouldn't be any such distinction, between things, any such functionality embedded in those things. But rather, when we move about in our life, be that even pursuing spiritual paths and going about our world and getting things and whatnot, we're doing that by dropping down our 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 what do you call by not analyzing things, by not analyzing things in the ultimate sense. So we do dropping down our if you will, the arms of analysis, arms of Madhyamika analysis, ultimate analysis. We're not doing that. Instead, we are just going by the mere conventionality of things, and within that, everything falls in place in terms of cause and effect, and there will be the causal relations, and all of these will be there. And that's the way to go about, even pursuing full awakening. Also, in terms of engaging in generosity and whatnot, we could be bringing in the Madhyamika understanding angle in seeing things like inherent existence, but that doesn't have to negate the reality of things, because the reality of things is merely contingent on, merely dependent on things being, softly dependent on things, rather than having any intrinsic, findable identity of their own, holding their place in that sense. Then, in that sense, so is none of that. And thus, even if we bring in the angle of analysis and kind of see things in the perspective of lacking inherent existence, if we understand it properly, that should not be harming the conventionality of things. We could be upholding it even stronger. And in the case of those who are not trained, not sophisticated enough in thinking along the Madhyamika perspective, we don't have to worry about whether things really exist or not, because if they are not findable in the ultimate analysis, because things are nonetheless still functional when we approach them in an unanalyzed, conventionally upholding perspective. So this part about unanalyzed, the practitioners engaged, what about when they analyze? They cannot practice. So such things will happen. That's the reason why I brought up the angle of someone like Madhyamika pursuing the practice. They could as well be pursuing it, because for them, things are conventionally true. And on the basis of that, things are conventional, functional in the unique ways that they are. And thus, dealing with them appropriately, one could then gain the result. But nonetheless, one doesn't have to be stuck in believing that they have true existence, because that would be limiting in one's perspective in seeing the reality, as well as limiting in terms of how much that action of engaging in a particular practice can deliver. So that is still possible, and there too, when they engage in the conventionalities or engaging in practice, whatnot, they could be doing that by not harming the conventionality of things, even if they may bring in the perspective of Madhyamika. But those who do not yet have that, one could still be engaged in the practices, in going about the world, because one would nonetheless be able to do so without harming the unanalyzed, conventional nature of things. So that's how they make this inroad in kind of having a dialogue and having kind of sitting together and kind of having a dialogue, begin to listen to each other rather than just leave. Beginning with a common example. So these two lines is very compact. The first line means one thing, the second line means another thing. So that's very important. By means of examples accepted by both the realist and non-realist, this topic of emptiness that I'm bringing in can be established. So when it can be established, that also establishes that it is real, it is existent, and that it can be even established, because we have these common examples of incongruency between, disparity between appearance and existence. Because for us, for the Prasangika Madhyamikas would be saying, for us, just the very fact that there is this incongruency, disparity between appearance, is itself very indicative of the underlying fact of things being totally contingent and mere dependent, with no intrinsic true existence of their own at all. And then when they bring up the fact of how the teachings themselves speak of practices of morality, etc., six perfections, with the aim of achieving full awakening, when they bring that up and saying how that might be in problem, the Prasangika Madhyamikas saying that when in our daily life, when we go about things by not questioning things in the ultimate sense. If we were to do so, and take it so seriously as one thing with conventionality, then we will not be able to go about our life. Rather, when we go about our life, irrespective of whether we are able to think from ultimate perspective or not, we should not be, or we do not have to harm the conventional reality of things. And there, the mere conventionality of things is as pertinent and as pertinent and as viable by mere fact of being thoroughly dependent. Thus, in the face of it, thus just within that reality of things being functional, but merely thoroughly being contingent on each other, with no intrinsic findable essence of their own. We will be able to even situate the things lacking any intrinsic existence because of the fact that they are merely contingent. So when we go about things in our daily life, we do so by accepting their conventional face value. Based on that, we can go about our life, and likewise we can do real things such as practicing and engaging in the practices and attain the results. And then it further clarifies the point by saying the common world sees functional things and conceives them to be truly existent, not like an illusion. In this regard, there is dispute between yogis and the common world. So this common world, or the common people, or the world of common people, this could be taken as referring to the realists themselves, saying the realists see functional things and conceives them to be truly existent. So you say that, so the Prasangika Madhyamikas are saying that the reason why they're saying that there is no problem, there shouldn't be any disagreement between us, because you could be, the realists are saying to the Prasangika Madhyamikas that you should be accepting that things are functional. Things are functional in the way they are, and that we are not mistaken in that respect. And that's what we call true existence. And you should not be, there's no way you could be critiquing that, you could be denying that. If you do not deny that, then you are accepting that things are truly existent, because that is true existence, because they exist and function the way they do. So they lump the two together, existence and true existence together, because they cannot think of any other way outside of it. For them, things to exist and function and affect and matter the way they do is good enough to think of them as being truly existent. And that is not just semantic. But for them, the very fact that they are different and functional in the way they are is indicative of some kind of an intrinsic capacity with them, some kind of intrinsic essence in them that makes them capable of doing that. They just cannot think outside of it, think otherwise. So they lump existence with true existence. If things exist, they must truly exist because of their making difference. They're being different from each other in so many ways. They kind of assert their true existence, their individuality. Of course, things are individual and functional and separate the way they are, but from the Prasangika Madhyamika perspective, their differences are solely, thoroughly dependent on mere contingency, with no intrinsic pointable essence of anything whatsoever. But they are not the realists are not there yet. For them, things being different the way they are is and functional the way they are in so many different ways, thus making real difference in the real world, is enough to make them think that things must have a true existence. And not just merely thoroughly dependent on causes and conditions with no intrinsic identity of their own, and let alone their being mere designated with lacking any intrinsic identity of their own. They are still farther away from that. So the Prasangika Madhyamikas are pointing out that the reason why we differ, why we have this disagreement here, is not because I deny or we deny the reality of things, or we deny the conventional reality of things. We deny the functionality of things. We deny the accuracy of our apprehension of things, as you pointed out. But deep down, there is a difference in how we see things, or what we see things to be, what we see as responsible, as embedded in things that is responsible for their individuality. Because you conceive things to be truly existence, not like illusion, whereas we do. Prasangika Madhyamikas see everything as like illusion, but you do not see as illusion-like. You only see illusion as illusion, but not others as illusion-like. But even in illusion also you see a true illusion there, truly existent illusion there, which is illusion like no other things. So illusion-wise, they are truly illusion. and so they do not see any other things like illusion, whereas we do everything as illusion without having to deny the fact of their reality, of their conventional functionality. So in this regard, there is dispute between yogis and the world. So yeah, as much as there is this actual debate actually initiated in this as much as it is presented like there is an actual debate already initiated here in this stanza, even by the way we outlined it by saying, refuting the existence, refuting the non-existence or the irrelevance of impermanence, irrelevance of emptiness. As much as it seems like there is an actual debate having started, here in this particular 6 lines, what is being laid out more clearly is the source of the disagreement. The source of the disagreement is being brought up here. We do not dispute we do not dispute the existence of things. We do not dispute the functional nature of things in their differences, diversity, capacity, functionality, etc. We do not dispute that the sense consciousnesses and our consciousnesses that apprehend things are unmistaken to a certain extent, to an extent that the realists accept. But what we differ is deep down. What do we hold there to be? What do we hold to be responsible for all those possibility, either what do you call imputing, either holding some kind of a intrinsic essence to be responsible for that, or in the lack of that, in the in the lack of that, within the lack of that, being able to account that on mere conventionality. So that's the foundation or the reason for our disagreement, not on these superficial levels that you brought up. So in a way, these 6 lines are pointing out that pointing out what the source of the difference is. So now we have to begin to think what is there other than what is there to be refuted in the form of intrinsic existence, other than ending up refuting the thing itself. How is there a difference between things existing but not inherently so? Things not existing in inherent way, but nonetheless still existing, and not just existing, making a real difference in the world. How in the midst of that, in between this distinction, we can really proceed on our mission, on our journey of mitigating sufferings and accumulating sources or causes of joy and happiness, including full awakening. So that's what we have to sort through in the course of this dialogue that we seem to be watching happening out there, but kind of take it in and let that dialogue happen within us to these sides. Between the two wolves in ourselves. Okay, I think sorry I didn't leave any time for question and answer, but we would definitely have time. Okay.